All right, hello everybody, and thank you for joining this decision-making drone use webinar series. Thank you to the return viewers. This is part 4, Integrating UAS and Fire Services, brought to everyone by FLIR Systems, FoxFury Lighting Solutions, Insight Fire Training, and 910 Drones. Again, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of our panelists. I'm Paul Rossi with 910 Drones. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the folks who are going to be joining us, and then I'll turn things over to Andy Starnes, who is going to get us deep diving into how drones are currently being utilized within fire. So if I can get all the panelists to start up their videos, I'll just go around here and start with Steve Rhodes, the chief pilot with Wake Forest Fire. Steve, thank you for joining us. We also
thank you.
We also have Brett Conda with us. Brett Conda is with FLIR Systems, and he'll be deep diving into some of the new technology that's recently been released. Thanks for joining, Brett.
Thanks, Paul.
We've got Bruce Sandy, UAS Program Manager with Pender Fire and EMS here in the great state of North Carolina. Thank you, Bruce, for joining us today. And we've got Chief Creasy from Bedford, Virginia. And with Chief Creasy is CJ Marshall, the UAS Program Coordinator out there. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you for having us.
And then also on, of course, we got Mike Chapman with FLIR Systems, who's going to be really helping us dive into these different topics. And we've got Andy Starnes with Insight Fire Training, who I'm going to pass things off to now and let Andy take things over and get you guys that great information about drones and fire that you're looking for.
Hear me okay, everybody? Paul, everybody good? All right. So we thank you for joining in. Some of you may have seen our video. We were advertising, but we're just going to share with you just a little bit more information than social media advertisements. We're looking at trying to get out as much information as we can from the people who are doing the work. I am by no means a drone expert. I'm a thermal imaging guy surrounded by drone experts. So for me, it's a great learning opportunity to see what's going on, and I like to learn and be around smart people and pray it rubs off. So hopefully today we'll get a lot of that information from these great panelists today. We want to thank each and every one of them for being here. That's the ones that already mentioned. Obviously, Mike, Paul, myself, Antonio from FoxFury Lighting Solutions, Steve Rowe, Bruce Sandy, Chief Creasy, and CJ, and then Brett is going to share with us some pretty neat stuff. But we're going to jump into a lot of cool topics, but we're going to start off with this guy right here. I don't know if you heard of this guy, but this guy's been really good to me. His name's Mike Chapman, so I made this really cool introduction video for you. See if you can see. Flying his drone in. I gave him his own. Mike, can you hear me okay, Mike? You all right?
I can, yes, sir.
All right. So Mike and I met a couple years back through FLIR and some other good contacts. And Mike has a wealth of information about a lot of things, but he is definitely very, very knowledgeable in the drone aspect of things. And he's been in business development. He's been in fire service. He's been in all kinds of stuff. And he's got a cool background in hazmat. But he's going to share with us this morning, why is this stuff even important? Because, you know, the biggest question we always get from firefighters every time some new technology comes out is, why do we have to do this? Why, you know, is this going to cost too much money? And why is this important to us? So Mike's going to give us some nuggets of wisdom on that. And I'm going to hit stop share, Mike, and let you take over if you're good with that, sir.
That sounds good.
All right, Mike, the helm is yours, sir.
All right, so you should be able to see my full screen. Is that working correctly?
Yes, sir.
All right. So first off, I want to thank everybody for joining us. All the partners here and all the panelists really appreciate your time. And the greatest thing about doing a webinar like this and having all you guys here is the ability to network, the ability to share. You know, sometimes we call people experts in the field, and there certainly are subject matter experts, but everybody tends to be humble, and we all learn from each other. And that's what the fire service is all about, is learning from each other, sharing lessons learned, sharing insights, and having the opportunity to grow your expertise on an individual level by listening and paying attention to those folks. And so that's what makes us all stronger, is participating in stuff like this. All right, let's see here. Andy, bear with me a second.
No problem.
So we want to talk about thinking outside of the box, and you see the bullets here. I'll just read down the bullets here. Where could you possibly need a drone in fire operations? Years ago, you know, we didn't really need the drones, or we didn't think we needed the drones. We didn't have the technology available to us at an affordable price point, and so we did the jobs, you know, as best we could with what we had. And you know, if you're an old school type person, you know, you may think that there's really not an application for the drones, but the real answer, at least in my opinion, is where couldn't we utilize drones in fire operations, or the fire service as a whole, or throughout public safety? We all know that fire operations today are not just fires. They involve floods, tornadoes, you know, hurricane response, you know, microburst, or things like that from individual storms, you know, wind events, motor vehicle collisions, active shooter scenarios, wildland fire and search, scuba operations, hazmat for sure. Just personnel accountability on any incident, tracking your folks. How about using them for pre-plans, performing a pre-plan in a non-emergency scenario? And the list goes on and on. So, you know, we want you to think outside the box and look at the opportunities for being able to plug things in non-conventional ways where you maybe wouldn't have considered before. The images that you see here down at the bottom are basically the visual version of this same thermal that's playing up top. And what you can see in general is that regardless of whether it's black dense smoke, white smoke, brown smoke, or steam, you have obscurity in the visual video down in the bottom. Obviously, the more smoke, steam, or whatever, the more obscurity you have, and you really can't see the big picture of what's going on. You know, we talk about 30,000 feet view. Obviously, with the drones, we're not that high, but call it the 300-foot view or the 200-foot view, or whatever the altitude. You've got a picture, you've got an image of the scene that you didn't have before. The video and the thermal up top, you're looking at a standard structure fire, residential structure fire, and you're able to see the roof conditions, where you've got potential weakening in the roof, where you've got ventilation. Notice the switching in the screen there from regular raw thermal to the MSX mode. The MSX is the combination of the visual camera and the thermal to give you enhanced situational awareness. So whereas your normal thermal camera would not allow you to see smoke because you see right through it, with the infrared capability, the MSX allows you to see some shadows using that visual camera, so that again, you've got that better situational awareness. You can see not only the fire itself and the structural stability and integrity, but you can also see, you know, where all the heat is, maybe hidden heat sources. You can see your personnel on the ground. You can see the fire hoses. You can even see kinks in the fire hoses. So you really got a lot of opportunity there in terms of what you can monitor aerially. I also want to point out here that it's not only thermal. You know, I am Brett speaking to you on behalf of FLIR, but from the fire service perspective, you know, I've been in fire service for a long time, and knowing when and how to use different tools is what's most important. Here you see that the visual camera is giving us not only personnel accountability, but literally a bird's eye view, and you can see that where they thought the fire was completely out and they were in overhaul mode, they actually had a working fire still going on in the closet space. And so they didn't know that until the drone flew overhead. So having those eyes in the sky, being able to get a different vantage point is important. Same thing what you see here. These two visual and the thermal are playing together. But right off the bat, you can see that with that aerial view, you can see the potential for exposures off of where we're currently you know, fighting the fire, or the incident we're currently working, and where our risk may be. You know, the fact that we've got the drone flying overhead, you know, we've got a house that's practically fully involved here. We don't need a drone to tell us that this house is fully involved, but it is giving us that enhanced situational awareness, that overwatch, or that bird's eye view to see where our personnel are located. and what the general overall safety concerns may be in the incident. I don't know if you noticed that when the video first kicked off, you might have seen some of the firebrands and some of the embers kicking up. Those are impossible to see for all intents and purposes with a visual camera as compared to a thermal camera. The thermal camera can show you extremely vividly where those firebrands are. And as we can all appreciate with the wildland fires out west, it's extremely important to know where those things are going, how fast they're traveling, and where the exposures are that they might potentially ignite. So I'm going to actually drop down to this bottom video down here and show you real quickly the difference between the raw thermal, which you're looking at right now. That's just a thermal camera versus the integration with the visual camera, which gives us the MSX perspective. So notice the difference here. This is the raw thermal. And then now you see the situational awareness change, and that you can see even the studs inside the building with the MSX, the visual camera, turned on and integrated. You can see the details of the window frame. And so this is just utilizing and understanding the technology to its capabilities. You know, you're not necessarily going to use every feature in every drone camera or every device that you have available to you, but knowing how to pull the different pieces of information is what's really important. This one here too, most people have a hard time figuring out or guessing what this is. You know, in the past, anybody that has been involved in scuba or underwater rescue operations, we've never had the ability to have great accountability of those divers once they're in the water. You may have voice communication with them, but knowing exactly where they are in the water, once they go below the surface, it's a little bit of a challenge to know exactly where they are. With a drone, however, you can actually track them very, very easily. This drone is flying at about 100 feet and actually is observing a scuba diver that's about 21 feet deep. And what you're looking at there with the bluish color in this particular color palette on the far right top of the screen, you see that plume or that cloud of color moving around. That is actually the scuba diver breathing out the air bubbles from their tank that are grabbing the cooler water at depth and then bringing that to the surface, mixing with the warmer water on the surface. And so now we can follow that scuba diver. We can see the trail where they swam from and where they are currently in terms of doing that rescue. So accountability is really great here. And should something go wrong with that diver, you can get people to him very, very quickly, or to her very, very quickly for rescue or intervention. You can also see there that as you change through the color palettes, it's really important to understand the capabilities and limitations of your equipment as it relates to the conditions and the environment. Some people may have a particular color palette they love or a particular isotherm that they love to use, but the circumstances of the day or the target or the environment that they're working in are going to change, and that may make it impossible or just not optimal to use that particular palette, isotherm, or what have you. And so having the ability to switch around and know how different things work and apply to different situations is really important. Fundamentals in thermography are really great to know when you get into drone operations and demystifying some of the unknowns or some of the stereotypes of things that may have existed before. For example, temperatures. You know, when you're flying with a drone, pinpointing a temperature on the ground is extremely difficult, and you get into the details of that with thermography and explaining why. But I'll leave that where it is. So here you see that you can do your hazmat aerial recon. What would have taken in the past, you know, many minutes, if not hours, to do a downrange recon on a train derailment or something like you see on the right, or in a large industrial facility, or sped up, you know, much more rapidly, and we're able to work much more efficiently to identify risk areas to the environment, hazards to personnel, where a fire may or may not be, whether there is or is not a spill, solid or liquid. You know, all those are things that are important in preparing a game plan to ensure OSHA compliance and just general personnel safety that drones are allowing us to do. Looking at your tank levels here in the middle and the bottom left. For aerial surveillance and recon from a flood standpoint, being able to look at potential for damage assessment, looking at potential victims. You know, when you look at a helicopter asset, deploying a helicopter is extremely expensive. You know, on the average, depending on the type of helicopter you have and the personnel involved, you know, $10,000 per hour or more in many cases for something like a Black Hawk. And when you look at a drone, I mean, you can pay for a drone, the most expensive drones, in a few hours. And you've got these flood operations, you need many aerial assets, and you need many, many hours, if not days in some cases, to effect rescues and large scale events. And drones are really great for you because you can fly them around the clock and you can identify those potential victims and then pinpoint them on the maps with different software available, and then send your much needed assets, whether it be your boats down there in the bottom or your helicopter assets, straight to those victims rather than using them solely for search. Being able to identify your victims in the water, again with thermal, you're extremely easy for body parts that are above the water. Wildland search and rescue, again, no different. Being able to use your mapping and your software in conjunction with the drones to fully cover the area and make sure that you don't miss anything. Capturing that video, being able to stream that video to third parties, whether it be in a command trailer or an ops trailer somewhere, or even off-site people to scan so that what the pilot may miss, somebody else may capture. And you see your victims there on the ground. It looks like two people, it's actually one. And what you're looking at there, that's just training with your camera, being able to adjust your parallax between your visual and your thermal cameras there with that MSX. You need to make sure that they're aligned so that you're showing not what appears to be a shadow, but one individual. Just different things to consider. Your aerial recon tactical planning for wildland fires. Obviously, your airborne manned assets are very important to coordinate with. In many cases, you cannot fly drones when manned aerial assets are in the air. But it depends on how people are flying, what the communications are, and how much training and coordination is taking place in advance. And so if you're developing a drone program, make sure you know the types of events that you can respond to and what those other parties are that may be involved, so that you can communicate and strategize and coordinate well in advance, so you have a game plan. So we don't run into safety issues, risks for those responders. Really mutual goals. They're not competing goals by any means, but they're mutual goals for public safety and response, but potentially competing agendas in the air, it seems, if not coordinated. This particular one here, this is a training fire for a wildland fire, and you can see that identifying safe zones, identifying areas where you may have water points for refill of helo ops for aerial drops, where your backfires are needing to be lit and or how they're progressing towards your main body of fire. The head of the fire, those kind of things are all important when you're trying to develop your tactical plans for fire attack and or protection of your personnel in terms of means of egress should something go wrong. Pre-disaster and post-disaster surveys. With your drones, it's unique because with these mappings programs that are available, whether it be a drone sense, a drone deploy, Pix4D, whatever the different softwares are available, or combination of those, you can fly aerial operations in advance of an event and then fly the identical path after an event. So you've got a before and after survey, and make it very, very easy to identify damage and value of damage, potential for victims where they might be trapped, and those kinds of things. So that said, I'll turn it back over to Andy, and we'll entertain questions towards the end. Hope you have a little bit of a different frame of mind in terms of different things that could be used for drone response.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate it. So we got a broad overview of what you can use drones for, but I'd like to add that it's really limited to the imagination, because if you look at what the world's doing, they're using drones for everything you can think of, from real estate to military to recreational use to, and then they're doing things to prevent drones. Like where I work, we have a drone defense umbrella system that will cause any drone that gets in so many hundreds of yards of the airport to land on its own, not very softly. But let's talk about some things that a lot of people don't consider. And I'm very appreciative that Steve is going to share this with us, because one of the things that we don't think about well in the emergency response world is we jump in with both feet without thinking about what do we need to do? What are some of the issues we may run into? So this is Steve. He's from Wake Forest Fire Department, and he is very well knowledgeable in this subject. And I appreciate Steve sharing with us. And Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So I don't have fancy slides to share with you, because I just wanted to talk honestly with you. This integrating drones in the fire service is a very difficult topic. I often walk around with a furrowed brow. And Mike Chapman, who's actually not that far from me, he and I have spent a lot of time talking about this. Mike is a great guy, by the way. I've been a manned aircraft pilot since 1988. I've been a public safety drone pilot since 2014. The fire department brought me on board because I was a manned aircraft pilot. And it's been a very interesting evolution because what I have observed is that so many people are rushing in to using drones in the fire service or other things that they're actually what I like to call accidental aviators. They've passed a test or their department has said you're good to fly, and they go fly without any sort of context of the larger world of how the FAA operates. As a manned aircraft pilot, I spent a whole lot of time with flight instructors. I hung out at the airports. I had local mentors. And so I learned so much about aviation from doing that. And these days, you're kind of set off on your own immediately. So when it comes to dealing with integrating and how you should proceed, the first thing you have to keep in mind are the rules. So this is the Federal Aviation book that I keep on my desk, and then this is the interpretation of all those rules that I keep on my desk. And the reason that stuff is important is because, as you just heard, sometimes in public safety we just jump in with both feet without understanding the consequences. The FAA is pretty much fed up with people bending and breaking the rules. We don't get a free pass in public safety. The FAA is statutorily required to maintain a safe national air system. You'll often hear that referred to as NAS. And the FAA in the beginning was very hands-off and very gentle. But now the FAA is going after agencies that are violating the rules. In fact, every day, the FAA tells me that at least once a day, they are filing new actions against primarily COA agencies, agencies that decided to get a governmental waiver for operations because they're not doing it correctly. So let me run through the key points. I've got about 10 total minutes here to talk. My contact information will be coming up later if anybody has any questions. So here are the top 6 most complex questions that I struggle with in helping people find the right path. The number one is that it's just difficult to incorporate new technology in a strong historical process. People who were in the fire service for a long time tell me about how when computers first came out, or SCBAs, or other technology that was new, how it was resisted at first. And that is very true with when it comes to drones, is that you can be all excited about getting a drone, but it's about how are you going to incorporate that in your department so that it generates actionable information for your incident commander. You don't need to fly, all right? The purpose of a drone is that it tells you something new and unique. It gives you new actionable information that you can pass along to the incident commander, who can then make a different decision than they would have before. As Mike said in one of those videos, you don't need a drone to know that the house is on fire. And there are so many times where you don't need to fly. Marketing hype that you read out there in magazines and you see online does not represent reality. You'll hear about all sorts of cool things about how you can show up and start flying and immediately stream video. I have been in those situations myself where they wanted me to stream video back to the state EOC, and once you do that and you go through all the steps, and now you're dealing with a new technology thing that can go wrong while you're trying to fly and do everything else. Unless they're getting something out of that other than just a pretty picture, there's no need to do that. So you read about things that are so easy to do. Drones will go do this, drones will go do that. But I love that video Bruce is going to show you coming up about flying in their area where they have a lot of pine trees that are scattered. And here where I am near Raleigh, North Carolina, it's very difficult to see anything on the ground because all of our trees are pretty dense. And so trying to fly to locate a missing person is almost next to impossible around here. Although the marketing hype says, no, you can do that. So when I say that drone pilots, public safety drone pilots are accidental aviators, generally all it's required to do is to pass an exam. You either have to pass a Part 107 exam, which is free and easy to do. The information's online with the FAA website, and all you have to do is pay for the test. By the way, here's a little tip. If you're going to go to a testing center, PSI is the company that actually delivers those tests technology-wise through the computer, and you can save 50 bucks on that test if you go directly to a PSI center rather than a local testing center. But once you pass a test, you don't have to take a flight test, you don't have to have a physical, you don't have to demonstrate your capabilities. You are now a licensed commercial pilot. But too many fire departments are making the wrong choice of going for the COA waiver, and they're flying under a COA. So a COA is not a free pass. I've actually had agencies tell me that the reason they went with the COA was because either they didn't want to pay to reimburse their firefighters to take the Part 107 exam, or they just wanted to approve any of their pilots to fly. But flying under a COA is not a free pass. It simply shifts all of the liability and the responsibility for overseeing operations from the FAA to the fire department. That means that the fire department needs to act as a commercial flight operation, and that is not necessarily something that local fire departments have experience in. Maintaining duty schedules, flight schedules, training, documenting all of the safety training. And when it comes to making sure the drone is safe, that is the most critical item. So just recently, you might have heard some exciting news about the FAA allowing public safety to fly beyond line of sight. However, that is only for agencies that have a COA. And the reason it is because there are no drones out there for sale today that are within our reach that are certified to be airworthy or safe. The reason the COA agencies get to do that is because they are assuming all of the liability and responsibility for determining that the drone is safe and airworthy. When it crashes or the FAA ramp checks them and asks for documentation on how they determine that, each violation is an $11,000 fine, and the pilot who was flying it at the time is personally liable for all the damages for violating many of the FARs. So departments that elect to fly under a COA have to determine, as I said, that it's airworthy and safe. Part 107 pilots are interestingly not eligible to fly under the beyond line of sight waiver because the FAA has not determined that any drone is type certified or safe. You might hear that Amazon was just granted a license to fly drone deliveries. Well, actually what they were granted was a Part 135 commercial air operation license to fly deliveries. And under that, they must make sure that all of their drones have been type certified, meaning they've gone through an extensive engineering and testing process. The FAA has determined them to be safe. When I asked the FAA, why would a COA agency fly beyond line of sight under this new waiver? The answer privately in my email above was, we wouldn't do it. I don't know why they're doing it. So the other issue that you have to think about, if you're going to go the COA route, is that not every flight that you make under a COA is actually a public aircraft operation. So it would not be covered by the COA. For example, demonstration flights, many training flights. If you flew for another department in the town, those would not be covered as a public aircraft operation. If you are ramp checked on those and you don't hold a Part 107 certification, then you would be an unlicensed pilot. So my advice for departments is to purchase the least expensive drone that you can right now, work out the integration process, do tabletop exercises, figure out how you're going to respond, deal with the incident commander, what types of calls you're going to fly on. The calls in my 6 years of flying the drone in public safety that are most appropriate are commercial structure fires, wildland fires, natural damage assessment, and hazmat situations like that train situation. So in closing, let me say that while it's not openly reported, I've talked about safety here, drones are, the current drones that are out there are falling out of the sky every day. I started a website, reportdroneaccident.com, and I've been gathering information from around the world. And one of the things that I discovered from information put out by the UK is that some of our larger drones, like the Matrice series, are actually fatal if they fall more than 6 feet and strike somebody. There have been cases of people being very badly hurt with a falling drone. So never fly over anybody, period, anytime. The only person the FAA allows you to fly over is your visual observer, but these things are falling out of the sky daily. Gentlemen, I've used up my time.
Thank you, Steve. That was good stuff. Appreciate it. Especially enjoyed the stuff about learning a little bit more about ACOA. I've learned a lot thanks to Paul, but like I say, just because you have the paperwork doesn't mean you should do it, right? So I like the accidental aviators term too. I may quote you the first 3 times on that one. That's good stuff. Thank you, sir. So since we've talked about why it's important, we talked about some integration issues and why we should be educated, and not just educated, but understand what we can and can't do and what the FAA is looking at and watching. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of those operations that are actually already happened and some background on that. We've got Brother Bruce Sandy, who is the UAS program manager for Pender, EMS and Fire here in North Carolina, correct? That's right, Bruce?
Yes, sir.
And I'll advance the slides for you when you're ready, and he's going to share with us a little bit of information on his background and a particular incident. That's correct? Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
So very quickly, my background has been in public and private industry. I did some software development for a while. I've worked in law enforcement. I've worked in EMS and fire. So I've kind of got a varied background in kind of figuring out, how do you respond? Our team's patch is Semper Gumby, which is, always flexible. Hit the next slide. I'm going to talk today about a particular mission that we had, but talk a little bit about what these guys hit on before me. One of the things that our team tries to do is we try to be a Swiss Army drone. We try to have capabilities for different responses based off of, of different scenarios. We understand that one drone doesn't fit all. So we have tried to outfit our teams with, varying sets of capabilities, and we try to train our pilots to be very good at certain types of varied sets of capabilities. So some people are better using thermal, some people are better with EO, some people do better with IR. And so we try to train with them to get smarter about the things that they do. Today, I'm going to talk about a call we had last year, a missing person call. If you work in the fire service or law enforcement, ultimately, everybody's had that day where it's kind of an average day. You're sort of sitting around in a meeting or discussing something, and you kind of get that phone call, and that phone call changes your day immediately. For us, August 19th of last year, there was a 911 call that went out around 11:20 a.m. Subject was lost in the woods. They had been out on a 4-wheeler the day before, and it had broken down. They spent the night in the woods. Subject had complained of being bit up by ants and was hungry and tired. So our 911 dispatch was able to pretty immediately get a hold of some coordinates for this particular individual, and they were able to give them to us, right? So it seems pretty simple. You send a team, you pick them up, you come home. Everything seems pretty simple. Things are never simple. No call is ever a routine call. So dispatched out a search team. Search team goes there, and they get on scene and they tell us about, Mike knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you've been in the East, we have these things called Carolina Bays. And if you look at a Carolina Bay, it looks like this. You can't see through them. You can't see around them. They're thick. And they were stuck in an area with a good bit of Carolina Bays, not a lot of air moving. They said they would be delaying. There would be a delay to get to the subject, and there wasn't a lot of air moving at that time. They asked for additional help. I put on here that particular time of the day. We went back and looked at after action. We looked at the temperatures. Heat index was 102 degrees, and at that particular time there was no air moving. Next slide. Pretty quickly, it took about an hour. The first team reached the subject and started to assess. They requested the second team due to fatigue. They were just tired and hot and worn out. They said the patient was non-ambulatory at that time. So we dispatched the second team. Second team was able to get there a good bit faster than the first team was, probably because there was a little bit of a path to get to them. About 30 minutes into that, the first team radioed in that they were having team members who were feeling ill, and they were starting to suffer from some heat exhaustion. They had used up their water, they had used up their supplies, and in some cases, one of the lessons learned was don't ever leave without your pack, without your whole pack, because they thought it was a standard kind of routine operation. They thought they'd be in and out of the woods in 30 minutes. They didn't take everything they needed. Team one, team two says they're working towards it, but team one was starting to sound more serious on the radio. And if you've been doing this a while, you know what the sound of somebody's voice sounds like versus what they're having to say. So we sent another team, a third team, into the woods with kind of full of medical supplies and water. Next slide. I'm going to go ahead and have you skip to the next slide and start playing the video, and I'm going to finish telling you kind of how this plays out. So team three goes in the woods. Team two now has folks that are starting to fall out. We're starting to count 8 to 9 patients that were still, potentially ambulatory or getting to a non-ambulatory state. At that point, the drone team had been being used just as overwatch to guide teams in to try to help them find their best path in. We decided to fashion a sling to the legs of a Matrice 210, put a bag on the end of it, because there was no other way that we could find that we were going to get medical supplies. And as that time frame was still going on, it was getting hotter. By about 2 o'clock, it was 110 degrees. So what you're seeing right now, you see the sling line coming through. This is a 150-foot sling line with a bag on the end that we put 500 milliliter fluid bags and bags of water. So we didn't know at the time. We took a guess at about 7 pounds was what we could carry. So we had loaded up 2 bags of fluid and 2 bottles of water. We flew them out, and 150-foot sling line with 125 foot of trees, you're having to stay at like 300-ish or so just to get there. And then you got to lower yourself down in. We had never done this before. We'd never trained for it before. We didn't know how it was going to turn out. So my biggest fear as a team leader was if you notice there's trees right next to where we're trying to drop this bag for them to get what they need. So we had to kind of work with the wind. You can start to see the wind had picked up at that point. We had to start working with the wind and try to drop this bag and not get hung up in trees, because if the sling gets hung up in the trees, we can't leave. We can't land, we can't do anything, and now our drone is out of service. So what you're seeing here is this was one of the first drops. We did 11 of these. We did 11 of these passes with water and fluid, and on the 12th one they asked us, because they're firemen, can you send some cans of dip? So we changed out a bottle of water with some cans of dip. And hey, look, some of them were scared. Like they were probably, there was probably some crazy naked and afraid stuff going on there at that point. So we continued to drop them supplies. You'll see a tractor on the ground as we pass through. We had made contact with forestry, North Carolina Forestry, which we have a good working relationship with. Forestry brought a tractor and basically pushed everything down and made it and started to make a road to where these folks were. We had one subject, one of our people who had gotten pretty severely non-ambulatory, and they weren't coming out on an ATV and they weren't coming out on a truck. So we also had made contact with the U.S. Coast Guard, who we have a good relationship with, and asked them for a helicopter. They sent a helicopter out of E-Town, Elizabeth City, to assist us in forestry. And if anyone's interested, I can kind of give you the SAR topo of this. We went back and remapped this and the SAR topo of this, what it looks like. So forestry went in while the helicopter was on the way, and they made a 100 by 100 landing zone for the helicopter to land to pull this particular individual out. So there was a lot kind of going on at one time. You know, we're flying supplies in, forestry's cutting a road. You know, you're kind of having to keep an eye on when Coast Guard's going to be there. So, you know, a lot of radio communication is very important. It's not just about flying, right? So, you know, like Steve kind of talked about, you know, you can't, in these particular instances, you kind of just can't be an accidental aviator. It takes a lot of skill. And I've got some really smart people on my team, some really capable people on my team. And even for them, they were shaking nervous about this. This was one of our harder missions. Everybody turned out okay. The end result was everybody was okay. We airlifted one. We treated for heat exhaustion, including me, because as that day went on, I got too hot, probably too nervous. We treated 27 people for heat exhaustion that day. So everybody turned out okay, but my point to that is this: no call is routine ever. Andy will probably tell you that 6 million times in a training operation. Nothing is ever routine. Don't take anything for granted. Be as prepared as you can whenever you get calls. I use the term Swiss Army drone a lot. You know, you got to be creative. You got to think outside the box, because in those instances, you never know what you're going to be asked for. We've been called to some hazmat situations before. We're not a hazmat team by any stretch of the imagination. The U.S. Coast Guard called us to a boat that was grounded in a channel near Camp Lejeune, and what they called us to come do was to fly it and see was there diesel fuel leaking off the boat. And as it turns out, there was. The way we figured out that was going on, luck was on our side because it was a cold day, but we flew it, and the temperature of the diesel fuel was different enough than the temperature of the water. We could see the diesel fuel running off in the water, and that was one of the ways we were able to tell that. But when we were heading into it, we had no idea what we were getting into. So, you know, be prepared for those things you're doing. Try to think outside the box. If you don't know what to do, ask your friends, and maintain relationships. Those are the takeaways that I can try to give any team. Is, you know, the relationship with the U.S. Coast Guard didn't start at this mission, but when I needed them, I picked up the phone and called them, and they didn't hesitate. They sent us a helicopter. North Carolina Forestry, the same way. The relationship didn't start this day, but when we needed a tractor, they didn't hesitate, because we've helped them so many times. They were on it. They came. They did what we asked them to do, and everything turned out okay. And most of the time, the reasons for that is because somewhere along the way, we helped somebody. So I think that's my time. That was kind of an interesting call. They asked me to talk about one that we've had, and I think from a think outside the box perspective, I think this is probably a pretty good one.
Thank you, Bruce. That's really good information. And I think that, one of the things I always learned from a lot of my mentors was learning from valuable lessons learned from incidents, positives, negatives, what we do differently. And that takes us sharing the pros and cons of it and sharing the fact that, hey, they got in there and didn't realize, like you said, they thought it was going to be a simple in and out and didn't take into account the heat. I mean, that's going to take out anybody. So, I mean, we have to put a little bit more foresight into what we're doing, kind of like what you were saying in the beginning. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Greatly appreciate it.
And Andy, I would just want to add, after seeing that and hear what Bruce says from a drone standpoint, is if you have a program, you're launching a program, this industry is very new. There is not a solution for every possible drone use case. And there's no right or wrong. What there is safe and unsafe. And I think Bruce could speak just maybe even quickly to how during that operation, putting the safety of the crew, right, and doing things, but doing things in a way that you're not putting anybody at risk, or you're taking on an inherent level of risk safely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we didn't do this blindly. Before we decided to do this sling and go forth, we had a conversation, and we kind of talked about what our risks were. And in every mission, we have a ditch plan, what we call a ditch plan. So if something goes wrong and you can hold control well enough, where are you going to ditch? What are you going to do? And sometimes that, sometimes the ditch plan is, don't hurt the people on the ground. In this particular case, we were flying over people's heads. That was a consideration. But one of the considerations that we learned after this, and after actions are very, very important. That's how we learn all the good things is after actions, and we make changes. One of the after actions we learned from this was pilot fatigue. On a hot day like that, things are a little tense. We made a change in our SOGs after that a pilot flies for 30 minutes. He becomes a VA for 30 minutes, and he goes, sits down and has a bottle of water or whatever, 30 minutes. And we do a kind of a rinse and repeat situation, because in those really tense situations, and you're really gripping down and you're really staring into it, it becomes, it becomes tiresome after you've made 2 or 3 of those rounds. So from a lessons learned perspective, that's one of the things that we did differently after that, because we learned that it just wore people out, being that stressed at that time.
Thank you for sharing that with us. It's good stuff. Paul, thank you for pointing that out. And we're going to move on to Chief Brad Creasy and CJ. If y'all will introduce yourselves. I met Chief Creasy, had the pleasure of meeting him through my travels and teaching, and we had the honor and humbling experience of coming and training with their department not too long ago. And great department, doing some amazing things. And if I must say, on a sidebar, one of the prettiest fire trucks I've seen in a while is inside of Bedford, Virginia. Beautiful stuff. I'm not a truck guy, but you got me with the tiller. I'm sorry. That's an awesome truck. You could convert me from engine to tiller guy pretty easily. But I'm going to let you have the floor. Y'all tell me a little bit more about yourselves and how long y'all have had a program.
Sure. Thank you for having us. Again, my name is Brad Creasy, and I'm the fire chief here in Bedford, Virginia. We are a small town of about 7,000 people, but our first due territory covers about 180 square miles. Most of that being national forest, but a population of about 23,000 total with town and county that we serve. I've got with me today CJ Marshall, who is our coordinator of our program. He actually is the mastermind behind our program. He came to me in 2014 and asked about starting a drone program, and I heard him out, let him tell me what he felt like the pros were, and I played devil's advocate to that, and he had great answers for all of my questions. And so we actually started our program in 2015, one of the first here in the state of Virginia. So I'll let him tell you some of our success stories and a little more about that.
So hello, my name is CJ Marshall, as Chief said. So some of our success stories that we've had in the beginning were we had a hiker that went missing on the up in the National Forest on the Blue Ridge Parkway. It was in April of 2015, and we were using a old school Phantom 2 with a GoPro camera and with a video transmitter receiver. And it was during the summer, so our foliage was a problem. We couldn't see through the thick foliage, but we did have cell phone communication with the dispatcher, and we had just put our service or our program into service that day, and 2 hours later we had this incident. And long story short, for that specific call, we went up there, we deployed, and she said that she heard something that sounded like a bunch of bees. So we maneuvered the drone to where she was over top of her head, and she told the dispatcher that she could hear it above her head, and our foot people, if you will, walked in directly to where the sound of the drone was and found her, and then assisted her out of the woods. That was our first call. Our most recent call was probably the middle school fire that happened this year, at the beginning of this year. A very huge loss for our community, but with the use of the drone, we were able to assist the fire marshals in their investigation. We were able to find hot spots within the building at different stages of the fire. And I do have some pictures of our fire investigation assistance in the fire investigation, if you will, just showing most damaged areas and what have you that I'll show here in a moment. We do assist law enforcement a lot. Law enforcement can be kind of a sensitive subject, at least in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where the law enforcement agencies are primarily responsible for search and rescue. And when you bring a fire department in, there's a command structure that tends to butt heads sometimes. So we've worked with our local sheriff's department and police agencies to kind of have that unified command structure, if you will, a little bit. However, we've made it very clear, just for the safety of our personnel, that we will not go to warrantable searches, but we will go to missing persons. If they have somebody run from a scene, like a car chase, and they run, we've gone out and helped them, just a bird's eye view, if you will, just trying to help them that way. We have had a hazmat scenario at Lowe's where a truck was dumping, I think it was a 55-gallon barrel of chainsaw oil or something, and it spread across the parking lot. Some thermal imaging was used on that day, and you could see where footsteps were tracked through it, and where it was puddling, and where it got into the overflow of the parking lot, or at least the drainage of the parking lot into their containment dam. When we define success, early on we were finding a person. Within the last year, we've changed our success definition to, did we help speed up the time? And with that, we went to Halifax County, Virginia, and we had a scenario where an autistic teenager wandered off from his house, and it was 200 acres that of wooded area and river area where we just couldn't find. So our success for that mission was we canceled out a lot of acreage by saying there's no body in that field, or there's no structure or no foliage that that person could be in. So that was a pivotal moment for us when we were able to redefine the success of that. And I'll show the pictures after Brad finishes.
I think it's important that we share with viewers today, some of the things that we've learned over the last 5 years, and some of them haven't come easy. But one is, we learned very early on that without a Part 107, a COA is required by the FAA. And as CJ mentioned, our first mission was 2 hours after we put the drone in service and had our pilot checked off. And we did not have that COA in place at that point, and it made national news. It was going across the ticker of ABC that morning, or the next morning rather, and we get a phone call from somebody in Kansas, one of the consulting companies that for UAV and the public safety world. And, you know, they ask, hey, you know, we just saw this, this news come across, just curious, do you have a COA? And we had no idea. We didn't even know what that stood for. So, you know, we started the process, but it's very easy, as Steve said, to jump in and become accidental pilots and to miss some steps in this. So it is important to try to get with agencies who have a program, who've been there and done that and have done it the correct way. You know, we learned very early on, we sat in a meeting with the governor's office on UAV, and we learned very quickly that there are a lot of different types of drones out there that have different capabilities, from flight time to payload to, you know, we were sitting with some commercial drone pilots that were flying an hour. At the time, we were flying 15 minutes before having to, you know, change batteries. So there's a lot of different vehicles out there. Some, as has been mentioned, you know, some are without a little out of reach for public safety, but there are a lot of different capabilities out there. A training program, you know, has got to be in place to ensure proficiency of our pilots, and we've done that, and it wasn't something that we really implemented well at the beginning of our program, but we have since done that. And we start off, our pilots that are interested in becoming pilots start off on something small, like a $500 Spark, and they fly that and get so many hours. After they've been checked off on that, then they have to go up to a Phantom. They fly that so many hours, show proficiency, and continue to move up to our Matrice. So I think that having a training program is essential for any department that's interested in getting into it. Unless your department is big enough to have a dedicated drone pilot, you know, you'll find that there are just some missions that you just won't be able to take on because you just don't have a pilot that's available. And that's one of the things that we've seen. We have a long history, 132-year department that's never missed a call. But we've had to turn some missions down for our drone program because we just didn't have an available pilot, and that's just the fact of the matter. And last is probably, you know, rural departments, especially volunteer, you know, will have a difficult time keeping up, you know, with the change in drones. And we're even seeing that with a fairly good operational budget that allows us to stay up to date in a lot of things. We had to realize very early on that, you know, some of these vehicles are expensive. I think our Matrice ran somewhere in the $10,000 range for that vehicle. It's got a $12,000 FLIR camera on the bottom of it. That's not something we can change every year. You know, we've got to have a life expectancy for that vehicle, just like we do for fire hose, helmets, turnout gear, and whatnot. So that's something that we had to come to grips with, that we just, you know, it's easy to get caught up and want the latest, greatest every time FLIR comes out with something. But unless you've just got an unlimited amount of funding, that's difficult. So I think we're just about out of time. Let CJ show you real quickly some of the imagery we took from this school. Again, we were able to get some really good footage while we were operating there, and it was a very prolonged incident. So we were able to actually get an operator up there and take some footage for our fire investigators and their office during the investigation.
So the purpose of this was obviously to map the site so that they could, you know, potentially use these images collected after the fire to see points of egress and specific fire conditions. And with this particular software, I can upload and you can see the georeference pictures. But just for this example here, you know, if you look at the map, you can see I did like a 360-degree shot of the room. And I'll just make this big here. Get that out the way. So with this, you know, we can zoom in and see specific fire or see the result of fire in this room And with the software, we can also, annotate and create little points of interest for that. So this is just one tool that we can use for that. It's easily shareable across many platforms, any computer, and this has helped the fire marshal identify specific areas. Unfortunately, I'd like to show you the 3D map, but I'm afraid that the computing capabilities is just too much to show everyone. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I'll show you what I can show you, as long as they permit me to from the fire investigation standpoint.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, CJ. Greatly appreciate y'all sharing with us. Definitely admire you sharing on everything from the beginnings to the importance of, hey, you just started a program and 2 hours later you're already using it. And that just shows you right off the bat how quickly and how much it's needed. And I can't tell you how many lost person calls our department runs. I know on average they have 6,000 missing person reports per month just in our county. So running one a day is not unheard of. So having a well-trained operator who knows what they're doing with it would definitely aid, especially what Bruce was talking about earlier, especially in the high heat situations we deal with. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise. And I think on the previous webinars, Rick from Texas said it best. We learn best from learning from others. So thank you. Let's see here.
I had a question, Andy. There were some questions coming in. Were we going to wait till the end and address some of these and have people
Yes, sir.
speak to them? Okay, right on.
And if they're in-depth questions, we'll send them an email as well if it's something wrong.
Okay.
But we're going to briefly cover about implementing drone use on the fire ground. One of the things I wanted to point out is drones can be used just about for anything, and they're only limited by your imagination, and definitely want to make sure you're well trained in them, as everyone's pointed out. But we use them in teaching, training and teaching, provide an optical view of things that they may not have seen. And one of the things we're doing now is when we're doing training, the decision makers, the battalion chiefs, the fire chiefs are able to see what's going on from the company officer perspective and get an aerial view. So that's very valuable to be able to do that. So don't discount it just as far as the incident side. You can use it for training and education as well. And this has been in use for a while. This is not brand new to the fire service. It's just brand new to a lot of us, especially me. But FDNY and a lot of other departments, just like Bedford and some other ones, have basically took the initiative to start showing us, hey, it can be done. And they're using it in high-rise firefighting incidents around the world. Drones are more than just a UAV. There are ground drones. There's all kinds of different ones being used. There's ones that are actually using hose lines and flowing water. So there's a lot of applications for this. But we're going to talk specifically about improving SISA and how that can help first responders, firefighters in general. And for my focus, I'm looking more at the out-of-the-box solutions, the more affordable ones. There are, as you said earlier, drones can be quite expensive, really just limited to how much pocketbook you have. You can spend $250,000 on a command van and then $100,000 on a drone and keep going. But most departments who are 2 stations or less and operating off fundraisers to have their budgets staying up to date, how are we going to do that? They're not going to buy a Sky Ranger, for example. So we got to help them out and give them out-of-the-box solutions, as Paul said in a previous webinar, that would help them. So a lot of departments are using what's known as a drone as a first responder. Chula Vista and some other ones are doing this, where they actually have drones positioned at certain points where they have operators just like dispatchers, and they're using those drones to get to a certain point and provide them that first person point of view that's giving them more accurate information. And I can't tell you as a first responder how many times, whether I was riding an ambulance or fire truck or whatever I was in, that we went somewhere and it was not the correct address. So what happens when we have to reroute and go around and have to go find the actual correct address? That's valuable time lost, and that could be somebody's life, their property. The drone can help fix that because we can get more accurate information. And here's another one from the public perspective, which is huge right now. Is this response warranted? I'm sending 3 engines and a ladder company and a battalion chief for a fire, and it's not a fire. What if they're able to get a drone there and say, hey, There's nothing showing on the initial. We can send in the first due engine and have the other ones cut back to routine traffic. They still keep coming, but you don't have 3 other companies going down the road, emergency traffic, endangering citizens for a false alarm due to steam from a shower. Okay, so this can help us tremendously if we use these resources to our advantage. From my perspective and what we teach, we're looking at the 360-degree size up is a critical component to training for first responders and firefighters. Before we attack an incident, we need to know what we're getting into. A drone can help us in understanding what level of fire involvement do I have? Where are the possible victims in this? Is this building starting to fail structurally? There's a lot of things that we can glean from that from the drone. Is the fire spreading a certain direction, wind direction, infrastructure issues, power lines? Can we even get to it? I think Bruce's testimony was, very vital for us to understand. They had to cut a road to get to them. What if this house is 300 yards off the road and it's a single path driveway? We can't fit an engine company down. We're going to need to know another way in. So we can improve size up by getting more accurate information. Most firefighters, police, and EMS would tell you they respond to incidents on incomplete, inaccurate information at best. So now we're getting more information faster. And then if we improve this by using other softwares or database solutions such as First Do and add that information together, multi-layered type software, we can confirm the location of it. We can confirm, do we have potential victims? Where are they? Location of the fire. We can look at identification of other things like, hey, this roof has 6 12-ton AC units on top and the building's on fire. That's important to know. What kind of roof construction is it? It looks like a flat roof. It's really a bowstring truss. We can look at those infrastructures that I mentioned, and we can incorporate other information, like I was saying, about software that can help us. This is one example my department uses. It's called First Do. It does a multi-layer, uses Google, GIS, lots of other software. So when the incident pops up, it tells us, hey, we're going to a 3,392 square foot residential property that has gas fuel, has a fireplace, before I even pull out of the station. That's great information to have. Then I take the other information I have, the wind, the weather, and I have a reported attic fire. Well, if I had a drone in scenario 1, look what I got. Before the building's even on fire, I can look at the roof lines. Anyone that's in the fire department or building construction can glean a lot of information from this. We can look at it from the standpoint of, okay, it's a lightweight truss, single family dwelling, 2 stories. So we know what kind of construction we're dealing with. Look at the roof lines. How many gables do you see? What does that mean from a firefighter perspective? Well, from an aesthetics perspective, like my wife, it looks pretty. From me perspective, it looks like there's lots of areas for fire to hide. Lots of voids for it to travel. Look at the circles. We've got chimneys, we've got vents, we've got different things coming through the roof that could give us indications, what's known as thermal bridging. In thermography, they talk about areas of heat loss. Those areas engineers hate, but from a drone perspective and a firefighting perspective, I can see where the heat is coming through the building, giving me a better indication of where the fire might be. Then I look for things like plumbing vents, chimneys. What does that tell you from a firefighter perspective and a basically common sense perspective? Those plumbing vents are usually connected to bathrooms or kitchens. Chimneys are connected to living areas. How does that help you when you're looking at the building? Hey, it's 2 in the morning. There's a bathroom there, which is usually connected to a bedroom, which is where I need to search. So it helps us because I've never been in your house before. And obviously, if it's at night, having that thermal imaging camera on there, plus a good light from our brothers and sisters at FoxFury would help us. So now let's look at this from a size up perspective. We're looking down approximately 150 feet. You're looking at smoke showing from the structure, which is my favorite phrase. What does that mean? What kind of smoke? Where is it at? This is a reported attic fire. You see in light smoke from the A division, heavier smoke from the Charlie side. It's a 10-mile-an-hour wind blowing towards the back of the house. What else do you know? Well, let's find out. What else can we learn? We can look at this from this drone. I want you to look at this. This was taken a couple of years ago. And I think the panelists spoke very well about this. It doesn't have to have a thermal imaging camera. Look at the detail zoomed in on this roof line. See that vent? Look around the edges of it. You see the charring around it? You see smoke coming around the gable? Watch as we move forward here. You see a little blackening around the edges of that vent through the roof. And obviously this is a training fire, but I want you to look what happens when we zoom out. Look how detailed the shingles are. Pretty detailed, right? Get it play a little bit better here. Move it out. Look how far away I actually am. Now, I'm 45 years old and wear glasses, okay? I can't tell you from this distance, you know, what kind of vents I have. Is it a vented ridge line? But when I go back to here, that's a big difference. And having that information, hey, you do have heavy smoke pushing out of there. That makes a big difference. Now, if I combine that with thermal, we always like to say you have the optical, you have the thermal, you get a more complete picture. Look at this. This is an older, I believe this is a Mavic. Paul might correct me on this, but you look at this, this is using a palette called Iron Bow or Fusion, depends on who you go through. But you can actually see the joist markings from where those roof joists are and the level of heat in it. And this is not solar loading. Those of you who've taken roof inspection classes before can tell the difference, but you can also see something pretty neat here that helps you out as a firefighter. Look at that. That's a thermal bridge around that vent. I've got high heat conditions here, here. So heat travels hot to cold. It's going to go this way or this way, depending on the wind direction. Does that help me as a firefighter when I'm stretching my line? Does that help me as an incident commander when they're telling me, hey, the fire's out, chief, and I'm watching the heat signature move across that roof and continue to intensify? Might want to get in that attic, ladies and gentlemen, and check again. So those are some other ways of checking. See if we can get our slide to move forward here. So there's a lot of options with drones, and unfortunately, sometimes they can be overwhelming, just like when we teach in thermal imaging cameras. And I think he pointed this out in the beginning. You need to know what you're getting into. They offer you a lot of different options. That doesn't mean you use every single one of them. There are varying color palettes for a reason. If you take a thermography class, they'll tell you that a lot of them are to impress customers, and some of them are for actual contextual purposes for specific temperature environments. So if I use a high contrast, high color palette, that's usually for a lower temperature environment where I can't really tell what's going on. Where like a standard black, gray, or yellow, or excuse me, black, gray, white, yellow, orange, red, standard fire service palette allows me to see pretty easily. But now if I don't have any contrast, I might want to use a rainbow or a fusion palette. When you start getting a lot of heat and use fancier color palettes that have lots of colors in them, you'll get something known as washout, where your eye won't be able to differentiate or discern the difference between different colors, and it'll look like a bowl of Fruity Pebbles or a bad acid trip. It won't look like a thermogram. These are called isotherms, where they use a specific color to isolate and show you heat. So you can see in this Fusion or Iron Bow, depending on the manufacturer, you can see the heat blowing out the gable end of the Bravo side, the Charlie side. You got an intake on the Alpha side. So I got a pretty good indication of where my fire is. So those help me. Look at the difference on this side when we're hitting it from the sunny side, where you kind of get basically some washout here. It needs the automatic gain control, needs to adjust. Here's what's known as sepia, or depending on who you use, it's a different color palette. Notice how the outside edges of the image kind of black out. The camera switched gain modes from either high sense to low sense, which causes you to lose discernible detail. You need to play with these, as he said in the beginning, you know, or Chief Creasy said they're playing with a $500 or $500 drone. You need to play with this flying over some targets and see what it does before you decide to fly it over that big fire they had in the middle school. So understand that each color palette has a specific context and a specific use that's beneficial, and you need to know how to use it before you actually go over a fire. Because this is a rainbow color palette early on in this fire, or high color palette, depending on who you use. But we can gain a lot of information as an incident commander and a first responder in this respect. I can tell you where the roof lines come together. Is there any indication of an attic fire, thermal bridging, roof voids, hidden fire missed by the interior crews? Like Mike was pointing out in the optical shot, I thought that was brilliant. Hey, we're in overhaul mode. No, you're not. You got fire over here. You might want to go check that out. Indicators of possible collapse. Obviously, these are not 100% guarantees. A mentor of mine taught me, when in doubt, check it out. We're looking at what we call qualitative thermography, not quantitative. So this is basically giving us heat readings. We're not looking for exact measurements because that's different level of things. That's industrial thermography, such as what we're doing with elevated body temperature screens. Fire service doesn't do that per se, not yet. Don't think we have the pocketbook nor the budget for it, nor do we want to try to teach firefighters to do emissivity calculations. So look at the difference right here of the roof line, and we're looking at the gable side on the alpha side where the ladder is thrown. Look at the variation in the color palette between green and red. See the joist running up and down vertically. See the heat signatures. That gives you a lot of information if you're a trained operator. And you also know the difference between the sunny side of the house and the shaded side of the house and how that affects that thermogram or that picture. And always compare that with the optical and have fire crews check it out. Don't just trust the image. Every device has a specific limitation. And so there's certain cameras, depending on the distance, depending on the environment, whether wind can cut your temperature measurements in half. Now that may not sound like a lot, but when I go up to Wyoming and it's negative 40 degrees with a 40-mile-an-hour wind, that's a big difference. So they may not be able to even fly the drone. Notice in this picture here, same house, but we're looking at the Alpha Bravo side. We got heavy fire and fire spreading towards the Delta. Okay, you're like, well, what's the big deal? I want you to look really closely around the windows, the Alpha Bravo corner, the front corner. Notice you see some slight hints of heat. And a lot of people stop you right here and go, wait a minute, you can't see through glass with thermal imaging camera. That's not 100% accurate because you're not considering the fact that the camera picks up heat, not seeing through it. I don't care about seeing through it because look at the difference in 30 seconds. Option A, got heavy fire in the attic, got fire venting out the front right there at the door. 30 seconds later, look at those windows that I can't see through. What's coming out of there? Heat. Think about the argon gas, think about the window frames, think about the caulk around it. All those transmit heat. I don't care about if I can see through the glass. I care about if I can pick up heat. You get too caught up in trying to get accurate measurements versus I'm looking for where the problem is. It's a diagnostic tool. Mongo see heat, we go find the heat, we put it out. We're not looking for a specific accurate measurement because we know they could be hundreds of degrees off. And getting back to our point here, we need to understand that using drones in the fire service can help us to get more accurate data, better outcomes. How many people saw the LA fire where they're coming off that ladder as that building exploded and consumed those poor firefighters? There was actual drone footage. What would have done, what would have the outcome been differently if a drone with a thermal imaging camera had been deployed and was able to get those readings back to the incident commander prior to them making entry? What kind of heat signatures would they have seen on that roof, around the edges? They could have seen things like this. Look at the roof, look at the infrastructure, look at the parapet walls. Every parapet wall has a scupper drain. From the side, I can tell how high it is, but with a drone, I can tell even better. I can tell what kind of roof it is. I can tell, is this building in good shape before it burns or not good shape? Look at the balconies. Do I have people there? Mike pointed out this in the beginning. Smoke, optically, I may not see a victim there. With a thermal imaging camera, I may see that victim in there. We're going to look for anywhere in the building that they would have put a hole and had a window, a door, a pipe, a vent, and then they tried to insulate it back because that's a weak point or thermal bridging area for us to see heat. And then we can look for other things. If you take a building inspection class, brick can actually start to fail and have stair-stepping cracks. If you take building inspection classes in thermography, you know that a lot of times those cracks hold moisture and they show up dark. Well, if I'm in a defensive mode operation, they're about to put streams to the side of this building, I want to know that this parapet wall is weak before I hit it, and I have a fire truck with 3 firefighters within 15 feet of the collapse zone. Because that killed a firefighter last year who happened to be one of my close dear friends. You want to know before you do that. This is a great video from Brother Mike about the difference between just a thermal camera plus MSX, where he adds the actual optical, where you can see the smoke. Remember, thermal imaging cameras reading surface temperatures, radiation, and convection currents coming off of it, not necessarily seeing the smoke plume, not seeing the steam, not seeing a lot of things. We want a more accurate picture. I want you to watch really closely as I fast forward this video. Look at the yellow on the roof line as it intensifies and gets worse and gets worse and gets worse. What if those crews are inside telling you, hey, Chief, we got this thing taken care of. We recommend a control time. No, I don't think just yet. I'd go do face-to-face and say, let's get in here get in this attic, put a line in place, and put water here, here, and here based on what I'm seeing. Because remember, in thermography, they teach us if you see a temperature on the outside of a building, it's at least double that on the inside based on the insulated qualities of the building. Because think about how much heat it took to transfer through that structure to show up on the outside as hot. So that's something firefighters need to understand. And a lot of companies or fire companies are doing vertical ventilation. We can prevent a lot of accidents, as in Mike's video here, by showing what the roof looks like before I put firefighters on it. You think we need to put anybody on this roof? No. I think it's vented well enough on its own, and if you give it about a minute, the whole side over here will be opened up. When you can see that amount of heat transfer, you can cut off an aerial, but I wouldn't put my foot on that roof. A quick Google search of Pete Dern's incident from Fresno will tell you why you don't want to step on a roof without knowing what's below you. He fell into a fully involved garage fire. Look at the difference of this aerial view. As he pointed out earlier, you can see where your firefighters are, your hose lines. You could even tell, I love that, you can see if they're even kinked. That's good stuff. Notice the little blue square showed up in the right corner. That was the camera shuttering or nuking. Don't move it too fast. It needs to adjust. So we move forward from single family buildings or dwellings to larger structures. Keep in mind, firefighters, when we treat these buildings like residential structures, we get in trouble. And a lot of times we can't do a 360 due to the sheer size. So a drone can help us with that. At night, I can't see where the firewall is, how far it's progressed thermally, optically. Having those eyes in the skies would help me tremendously as an incident commander. Helps me know what building I should write off, where I could cut this fire off, where I need to focus my priorities and search. We search from the greatest thermal threat back. Zero visibility at night, pretty important for me to have that data, especially if you get a low atmospheric ceiling. Smoke's going to travel far, it's going to block out your ability to see. And thanks to the wonderful construction industry, we have even greater threats called podium style apartment buildings, where they take up several city blocks. I spent 7 years in an area that had these being built faster than I can tour. And this is 4 buildings in one with interior courtyards that you can't get a ground ladder to, nor an aerial, and it's wrapped around a 7-story parking deck with no sprinklers. You think it's going to be a pain in the you-know-what to find a small fire in this building? What about a drone flying over the courtyard telling me I do have people inside? A drone over the roof telling me I do have an HVAC unit on fire? A drone telling me I have a car fire? Look at just the things I can see from this. I can see the parking deck. I can see the light rail. I can see so many things that I wouldn't normally see. It helps me tremendously. And as I said earlier, when you get these buildings in place, they don't care about the fire service. Aerial ladders may be out of play. So we have to take into consideration what could be in play. We need to have that view from the drone to be able to see that, because you don't want it to end up like this. This was in Fairfax last year. It was $425 million in total damage. The heat signature was visible from space. This is a lumber yard, basically. These apartment buildings are massive. Being able to find the fire faster and stop it or mitigate it can prevent massive amounts of damage. So, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to close pretty quickly. This is a great video from our friend Brian King on commercial incidents. Look at the view from I believe this is the Sky Ranger flying in and looking and seeing, hey, they actually are putting water on the propane tank. When you're flowing water a long distance at night and you've got things in between you and the target, you could be missing that tank. You've got firefighters in the hot zone. You want to be able to see where they're at. Are they okay? Are they where they need to be? Is the fire advancing towards them? Has the wind direction changed? What are those cylinders to the right of that? What are the temperatures around that? What does the runoff look like? What kind of collateral damage can I expect from wind changing with smoke from this heading towards a residential neighborhood? All of that I can see, and I can put that data in and use the software and use that in a command center or command vehicle to my advantage to not only mitigate the incident, but prevent further injuries and illnesses to our citizens. So that's mine in a nutshell. But right now I'm going to turn it over to Brett, who's going to talk to us a little bit about what's the future hold. And the future is now. So Brett, are you there?
I am here.
All right, Brett, you let me know when you want me to move the slides forward. I'm going to mute my microphone and turn my video off. Stand by
Perfect.
here.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, Andy. And that was, the last hour and a half has been unbelievably educational, and I think that was a perfect transition, Andy. You know, understanding some thermography concepts and how it relates to our product roadmaps as we develop new payloads. And so the FLIR View TZ20 here is our newest product. We launched this last week at DJI Airworks, and we always try and start with the voice of the end user and the customer and work backwards. And so when it comes to this camera, we really had public safety officers in mind, and specifically firefighters. What I hear consistently from the marketplace is that being able to zoom will make our lives a lot easier. So we listened. And because most firefighters and public safety operators are flying qualitative missions, which Andy touched on here just a second ago, and real quickly, the thermography concept of qualitative versus quantitative analysis is that in quantitative analysis, you're going to be relying on the temperature values within every pixel. Generally speaking, that's going to be more applicable towards industrial inspections. So the thermal core that is inside of the View TZ20 is the boson. Now the boson doesn't have radiometry quite yet, hence it is a qualitative camera. Now this camera is first of its kind. It has two 640 by 512 resolution boson cameras inside. There is not an RGB camera, but our thought process when we were building this product out is that at this point a lot of people are flying an M210 or an M300 with a high resolution zoom RGB camera already on board. So the key feature of this camera is that it is a DJI PSDK payload. Therefore, it's compatible with the Matrice 200, Matrice 210, and the M300 version 2. So it is back compatible with most of the drones that you're already going to have in your fleet. But this camera gives you a 2x, 5x, 10x, and 20x zoom, which is the first of its kind in thermal. There are drone cameras that go up to 30 times zoom in the RGB spectrum, but when it comes to the thermal and infrared spectrum, this is going to be the first camera that's going to give you up to a 20 times zoom. So 2 time and 5 time is going to be optical zoom, with 10 times and 20 times zoom being a digital zoom. So this is going to allow you to have a 15-degree wide field of view camera that's going to give you unprecedented situational awareness. And then when you see an anomaly or a problem, you're going to be able to zoom in all the way and clearly identify what that anomaly is, because both cameras are 640 by 512 in resolution. We also listened to the market when they told us that we have too many camera options, too many lens options, too many resolution options. So we made this one really simple. There's only one version of this camera, one model. It's operating at a 30 hertz frame rate, which is going to be important for public safety, because I know a lot of your missions are reliant on live video feeds. So the difference between a 9 hertz camera and a 30 hertz camera is basically how many images the camera is taking per second. So in a 30 hertz camera, you're going to get 30 frames per second, which means as you're viewing your live video, you are not going to get any skipping, and you're not going to have any delay in that video. So really important for public safety operators here. Let's see here. It quickly connects with Skyport. It's already gimbalized. It's a plug and play payload, very, very easy to operate and easy to connect to your system. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is going to be a really good visual representation of a very wide 15-degree field of view on this image. Next slide. So now we'll move into a 2x zoom. Next slide.
These are your side by side.
Oh, these are the side by sides. Okay, let's move to the next one then and try and get the here. Okay, perfect. So this is going to be a 10x zoom. So the key to this camera is that you're maintaining resolution. You know, all too often in the drone industry, we have cameras that zoom, but as you zoom in, it's almost impossible to have good resolution and get what we call pixels on target. So with this camera, because you're toggling back and forth between 640 resolution cameras, you're not going to lose resolution as you zoom in, as you can see here in a 20 times zoom. So pretty impressive capabilities with the fact that you can now zoom in on your target and maintain resolution and be able to see with that narrow field of view.
That is impressive, my friend, because the
Yeah,
zoom on
this
a
is
handheld is worthless. So that is
right.
awesome.
Right. This is really the first of its kind. This is going to be the first drone payload on the market that has 2 thermal cores inside. You will not have MSX with this camera, but the XT2 is still available, which has MSX and the radiometric features if you need that. But we're very excited about this camera for public safety operators. We think it's going to help you carry out your mission, enhance situational awareness with detail when you need it. So we hope that you all enjoy the camera. It will be available. It's available now, but we will be shipping in the beginning of October. And the camera is $7,500 with 1 SKU. So we tried to reduce the price point for the public safety operators out there, and we think this will be a good solution for you as you move forward in your drone operations.
Thank you, Brett. That's
And,
awesome information.
And Andy, if I may, just adding one more note to that, the ability to add the XT2 if you are flying with a Matrice 210 still exists. So if you wanted to fly both of those cameras, you do still have your MSX capability, or you could use your Z30 in combination with that View TZ20. So really important to remember. You've got a lot of options, especially with the dual gimbal drone. And one other comment that was raised during some text exchange was in my overview of thinking outside the box, which would show up particularly useful in Bruce's application. Maybe not if you're flying IV bags, but if you need to drop payloads, is having some sort of an Osprey type system where you can drop a payload to the people down below. And having this View TZ20, whether day or night, that's going to provide you some advantage being able to watch that payload and where it needs to go. So thank you very much.
And I want to add, Mike, is that this having the 2 different thermal cameras for nighttime operations, when you're flying an XT2, that visual camera at night may be useless.
That's right.
So when you're doing that search and rescue, this probably isn't that camera, right? That affordable, right out of the box starting your program. But for those operators, Brett, you mentioned they don't have the MSX. But again, when you're familiar with these kinds of operations, that enhanced situational awareness of dual cameras is like huge, big time. So definitely interested to get folks in public safety connected with that payload.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great
We're excited about it, and the zoom capability is really the most important part of it, and the fact that both thermal cores inside are 640 resolution is going to be really important as you're looking for small targets in the field, and you're going to be able to fly less using this camera, which is going to reserve your battery in the field, and you're also going to be able to do further standoff distances with the 20 times zoom. You'll be able to zoom in on a window or a target during a structure fire really easily at maybe a 300-foot, 400-foot standoff with this camera.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a whole different level of situational awareness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you to all the panelists who took time today out of their busy schedule. We appreciate and value your input more than you know. I believe Paul said there was a few questions possibly. Was there any we could answer or haven't been answered?
There were a couple questions that came up in regards, and they kind of got answered out here. The fleet, people kind of mentioned the different drones in the questions there. Yeah, I think we kind of covered those.
I see a question here, Paul, about the TZ20 being compatible with the M600.
Oh, okay. We've got questions coming in the chat here now, so
yeah.
Go right
so I can answer that one. It's not going to be plug and play like the M200 or 210 or 300, but it is compatible with a little bit of integration work.
Brett, I have added at the end here everyone's contact information. So if you want to reach out to these valued panelists and learn more from them and contact them, if you're not aware, FoxFury sponsored this, and they provide one of the most amazing lights to go on drones, and very simple, easy to add on to, and You're flying at night, you want that light. It makes a big difference. And our big sponsor here, 910 Drones, Paul, I'll call him the grand conductor. He's been facilitating all this in the background, so thanks to him for doing this. He's local here in North Carolina. It's been a huge asset and blessing to me. Please reach out to him if you have any questions regarding training, drone purchases, any of that. He's into everything drones. I just say that. He's even teaching kids in school about drones, which is pretty cool. Matter of fact, I may be signing my daughter up for some of your work here because she wants to fly my Evo, and I'm like, we're gonna start with something small.
We'll have her showing you some things.
Good.
We'll
He's teaching me anyway. Why not? You know, I don't know how to operate the smart TV. He already knows how to work it. Brother Mike Chapman, who I've known for a long time, we thank you for your expertise and everything you shared with us. You can reach out to Mike. Mike's a wealth of information, everything from one thing Mike's helped me a lot with is when we talked in the beginning about when Steve was talking about integration issues. Mike's helped me a ton with integrating cameras into certain platforms and getting things to work. We were just doing that the other day with an ARF camera. So wealth of knowledge, please reach out to him. He's here local in North Carolina as well. Great guy to contact. And I believe I got Brett. Did I get your information correct here? Make sure that's correct before I tell everybody. Good?
You got it.
Good. Brett is the UAS business development manager, and Brett doesn't know it, but I've been stalking him online. I've been listening to his LinkedIn stuff, his webcast. I've been reading, listening. I'm always a Google Scholars even got you a couple times on my feed. So I've been listening and learning from you. Thank you for your work.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. Bruce, this is your contact information. Please make sure this is correct. Obviously these guys have been doing this. Reach out to these guys. If you're starting a program or you're going through stuff, talk to these guys. They've already done it. Learn from them. They're willing to share with you their testimonies, their trials, their tribulations. Steve was kind enough to share with some of the stuff that, I didn't even think about, accidental aviator. We just fall into it. That's how I got into it. Let's learn and before we fly so we don't get grounded, right? We don't need to be one of those legal precedents, so to speak. Reach out to these guys and learn from Chief Brad Creasy and CJ. Thank you so much for sharing everything y'all have been through and some testimonies, especially how just within a couple hours you already were using the program. I mean, how much more valuable and more public support are you going to get and say, look what your local department did, and within 2 hours this program's in place and we've already made a rescue. That's huge. The world needs good PR right now. Amen. Let's keep it that way. We got enough negativity. This is positive stuff that your tax dollars at work saved someone and made a difference quicker, faster, more efficiently. So is that correct information correct there, Chief Creasy? Is that
Yes,
right?
it is. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for taking the time and sharing with us. And is my contact information if you need anything. We train and educate and help people with handhelds and got into the drone thing thanks to these wonderful people. But our world is thermal imaging. So if we can help you with that, let us know. We've been all over the world and we'll be in Poland next month. Good Lord willing, Corona doesn't stop us. And we greatly appreciate your time, expertise. And this will be, somebody asked, will it be available for rewatch? It was on Facebook Live. And I believe, Paul, can you answer that? Are we going to put it on YouTube? Is that correct?
Yeah, this will be available on YouTube for anyone that registered, whether they attended or didn't attend. And then this will also go out in our email blast to anyone as well. And it is posted up on Facebook. And I don't know if you're closing out. Are you kind of wrapping up after this slide? Then I'll just say in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks from today, we've got the drones and hazmat response operations webinar that folks can register for. We've got the link out. There's on Facebook, there's a way to find that through Andy, FoxFury Lighting, 910 Drones, and then also on LinkedIn, we've got that. And I would encourage everybody that's tuning in, that whether it's live or recording, to reach out to Mike Chapman, Andy Stars, Bruce Sandy, Steve Rhodes, Brad Creasy, CJ Marshall, Brett Kanda, myself, Antonio. Reach out to these folks. We're all open to communicate and talk and follow up on any of the stuff that was covered. And really hats off to you, CJ, for, going out there in the beginning and getting some information in a town of 7,000 people where everyone might think this is not something we need, and going out there and getting that information and then bringing it to your chief and to Chief Creasy for, hearing him out and seeing the pros and bringing that on. That's just awesome. I really appreciate that. Thank you to everyone that came on.
Thank y'all so much for your time. Appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody.
Look forward to
Take
the next
care.
one. Thank you. Bye-bye.